In February of 2016, Marina La Nina, an unnamed female teenager, and Raymond Gates went to the latter's apartment in Columbus, Ohio. La Nina and her friend had met Gates for the first time the day before at a local mall. The trio drank copious amounts of alcohol, and the teenager became heavily intoxicated. At some point during the meetup, 29-year-old Gates pinned La Nina's friend down and forced himself on her as she repeatedly screamed, "No," and "Stop." Instead of intervening, La Nina live-streamed the assault on the social media app Periscope. She could reportedly be heard laughing and giggling throughout the stream. One of La Nina's friends from another state came upon the footage and alerted law enforcement. She and Gates were subsequently arrested on multiple charges stemming from the abuse, which included kidnap and battery. Gates pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 9 years in prison in October of 2016. La Nina, who was 18 years old at the time of the incident, told law enforcement that she'd begun filming the attack because she thought it would help her friend. The prosecution argued against her statement, claiming that she'd gotten caught up in wanting to get likes on her broadcast. Psychologists who examined La Nina reached the same conclusion. Pamela Rutledge, director of the Media Psychology Research Center, told a media outlet that her psychological need for approval and the thrill of the event were greater than her concern or empathy for her friend. La Nina faced up to 40 years in prison, but she reached a deal with prosecutors that saw her sentenced to only 9 months for failing to report the assault. Number 6. Shanavia Miller. In July of 2016, Georgia woman Shanavia Miller took over her daughter Naya's Facebook and live-streamed herself physically punishing the teen. Miller's rage reportedly stemmed from the fact that Naya had recently posted a photo to her social media in which she only wore a towel while in the presence of an unnamed boy. The video, which lasted over 5 minutes, began with someone else in the home live-streaming Miller as she confronted Naya and accused her of being promiscuous. Miller began striking her with a piece of plywood as the teen retreated into the kitchen. Over the minutes that followed after the plywood had broken off, Miller proceeded to forcefully slap and punch her daughter repeatedly in the face, head, and abdomen. The enraged mother continued screaming at the teen as she cowered into a corner, crying profusely. Miller accused her daughter of having brought a boy into her home and then embarrassing her by posting the photo. After the brutal beatdown, Miller took the phone, which was still live streaming, and urged viewers to make the video viral, adding, "I'm not done, more to come." The footage attracted considerable attention online, with most users condemning Miller and calling for her arrest for beating and publicly shaming her daughter. Still in control of Naya's Facebook page, Miller responded and claimed that she loved her daughter but wouldn't allow her to disrespect herself. Having seemingly regained control of her account, Naya also made a post claiming she loved her mother and understood why she acted in that manner, writing, "I embarrassed my mama, so she embarrassed me." According to Savannah police, Naya reported that she felt safe in the home and no charges were pressed against Miller, but the matter was reportedly referred to child protection authorities. Number 5. Juwan Anderson and Sequan Pollock. Bishop Lamore Whitehead from Brooklyn, New York, was in the midst of a sermon at the Leaders of Tomorrow International Ministries in Canarsie on July the 24th of 2022. As Whitehead was speaking to his congregation during a live stream, 2 masked men stormed the church with pistols in hand. The bishop was ordered to get on the floor as the robbers made off with several of his and his wife's valuables. The jewelry that was stolen was estimated by Whitehead to be worth roughly $1 million and included the bishop's Rolex watch, a Cavalier watch, a Cuban link chain valued at $400,000, and a $25,000 ruby and diamond ring. It was initially suspected that Whitehead had staged the heist. The bishop himself had been investigated for multiple instances of fraud and extortion proliferated through his church. A close friend of New York City Mayor Eric Adams, he'd previously spent 5 years behind bars for charges of identity fraud and grand larceny. In recent years, Whitehead was nicknamed the Bling Bishop for ostentatiously displaying his wealth by driving luxury vehicles, wearing designer clothing, and expensive jewelry. Whitehead would eventually be charged for his dubious dealings in December of 2022. But investigators determined he hadn't been involved in the July robbery as the perpetrators had simply acted on the wildly held knowledge about the bishop's affluence. Juwan Anderson and Sequan Pollock were arrested by the FBI and hit with federal robbery charges in September of 2022. Anderson and Pollock, both aged 23, pleaded not guilty, and their trial was set for July of 2023. After the arrests were announced, Whitehead told the media that he forgave the two men as he stood outside a Brooklyn courthouse. Number 4. Brian Fields. On March the 31st of 2016, Brian Fields was live streaming on Facebook while outside of a corner store at 56th Street and Hoyne Avenue in the West Englewood neighborhood of Chicago. Fields knew that the area was populated by gangs and joked during the stream that he needed the store to open up so he'd have somewhere to duck and hide for cover. Moments later, as Fields spun around while recording himself, the camera captured some people standing behind him. Gunshots then rang out. Fields dropped his phone, which landed with the camera pointing to the sky. It recorded a man wielding a gun with his arms outstretched as he fired at least a dozen more shots. Fields survived and, according to his mother, was placed on a ventilator in the intensive care unit at Mount Sinai Hospital after sustaining wounds to his legs, stomach, back, and jaw. Chicago police confirmed that the live stream was not a hoax and expressed suspicions that the shooting was gang-related or possibly in retaliation for the victim's second-degree murder conviction in 2009. A few months later, on October the 28th, 30-year-old Fields was sitting in his car at a Southside station with Chiquita Ford, also aged 30. A gunman, later identified as 19-year-old Lorenzo Parrish, approached the vehicle and opened fire, killing Fields and Ford. Parrish was subsequently arrested and charged with 2 counts of felony murder, of which he was later found guilty and sentenced to life imprisonment. Number 3. Andrei Burin. In October of 2020, Russian model Elena Efremova was attending a social media party hosted by popular Moscow-based streamer Andrei Burin, better known as Melstroy. The gathering was held within the context of a wider trend called trash streaming, which had begun to gain traction in Russia. It typically involved streamers doing dangerous dares, at times collaboratively, in exchange for donations from their viewers. During the live meetup, as other streamers were talking in the background, Burin grabbed 21-year-old Efremova by the head and neck and started screaming at her. In the moments that followed, while addressing his viewers, Burin slammed Efremova's head against the table multiple times. The young woman slumped backwards in her chair, and then as she got up, was pushed out of the camera's view by 23-year-old Burin. A few of the other streamers went to check on Efremova, but most of them remained uninvolved. The abusive scene had been broadcast live to Burin's subscribers, which numbered over 680,000. In the moments that followed, Burin seemingly asked Efremova to sit back down while apparently trying to refrain from laughing. In a subsequent post, the victim confirmed that she'd been beaten and publicly humiliated by Burin. She also noted that her retainer had broken during the attack, leaving her mouth a bloody mess of iron, blood, and pieces of torn skin, and posted photos of her injuries. Blogger Efremova asked her 20,000 followers to move away from Burin's content, and also encouraged others who'd suffered violence at his hands during his extreme live streams to join her in filing a class action lawsuit against him. Vadim Manukyan, an expert on the Media Commission of the Public Chamber of Russia, described the footage as an absolute disgrace. Burin was subsequently arrested, and Efremova asked him for the equivalent of $137,000 in compensation. While outside a Moscow courthouse, the trash streamer mocked the amount of money that Efremova was asking, considering it humiliatingly low for him to pay. Updates from the summer of 2021 indicated that Burin had been found guilty of assault and sentenced to 6 months of corrective labor with a 10% deduction of his salary as state revenue. Number 2. Ales Olovec and Martin Kovach. 2 Slovenian men were taken into custody after they'd live-streamed themselves on Facebook, fatally beating an acquaintance. The incident occurred in the village of Podboce after Ales Olovec, Martin Kovach, and Andrei Kekuta had been drinking together. An argument erupted after 26-year-old Kekuta had reportedly uttered an insult involving Olovec's mother. 20-year-old Olovec and Kovach, aged 29, ganged up on the man and beat him into unconsciousness. 23 minutes of the attack were broadcast live on Facebook, and it showed Kovach still striking Kekuta as he lay limp on the grass. The police received an anonymous tip about the gruesome attack, which had received over 250,000 views and hundreds of likes. In the hours that followed the beatdown, the authorities took down the video and arrested the duo. Kekuta was still clinging to life when the police found him, but he eventually succumbed to his injuries in a local hospital. In the fall of 2017, Kovach and Kovach, who'd become known in the Balkan country as the Facebook Killers, were found guilty of murder and for the illicit broadcast. Kovach was sentenced to 21 years and 11 months in prison, while Kovach received the same sentence minus 1 year. We have our previous release on when getting caught in the act goes wrong lined up for you after number 1. Stay put if you haven't seen that one yet. Number 1. Jordan Hill. Tesfaye Cooper, Brittany and Tanisha Covington. A group of teenagers were arrested by Chicago law enforcement in early 2017 after disturbing footage of a man being beaten and tortured while held hostage was live-streamed on Facebook. On January the 3rd, police found a distressed and disoriented man walking down the 3400 block of West Lexington Avenue. They determined that the 18-year-old who was wearing shorts in spite of the cold weather was mentally challenged and that he'd recently been reported missing. Investigators later became aware of a social media video in which the same individual was being brutally battered and bullied while being held hostage by a group of teenagers. His captors were identified as Jordan Hill, Tesfaye Cooper, along with sisters Brittany and Tanisha Covington. The victim had been dropped off by his parents at a McDonald's in Sherwood, Illinois on December the 31st of 2016. It was there that he met Hill, whom he knew as they'd attended the same school in Aurora. Hill had stolen a van and made the victim sleep inside for several days while he visited friends on Chicago's west side. On January the 2nd, the teen's parents reported him missing. The following day, Hill and Cooper drove the victim to the home of the Covington sisters, where the group tortured him for hours. The ordeal was live-streamed on Facebook by Brittany Covington, and the footage, which lasted less than 30 minutes, reportedly only displayed a fraction of what the victim had had to endure. He was shown cowering in a corner with his hands tied and his mouth taped shut. One of the perpetrators was seen pulling on a cable that had been wrapped around the victim's neck, causing him pain. Additionally, he was punched, kicked, and had his hair cut with a knife until his scalp bled. The group cut his clothes, flicked cigarettes at him, and forced him to drink out of the toilet. At one point, one of the tormentors called his parents demanding ransom for his return. The victim was white, while the 4 attackers were black. During the onslaught, the group made explicit remarks about Donald Trump and white people, leading to the suspicion that the attack had been racially or politically motivated. The 4 were reported to have stopped and left the apartment after neighbors had complained about the noise. The battered victim was subsequently spotted by Harrison District Officer Michael Donnelly as he was walking with Hill. The 18-year-old who'd been left severely traumatized in the incident's wake was taken to a local hospital while all 4 of his tormentors were arrested. The incident sparked widespread outrage and was publicly condemned by President Barack Obama. The teens initially pleaded not guilty but progressively changed their pleas. Brittany Covington admitted committing a hate crime, intimidation, and aggravated battery in a deal that saw her sentenced to 4 years of probation and 200 hours of community service. Her sister pleaded guilty to the same charges and was sentenced to 3 years in prison. For their roles in the incident, Hill and Cooper each faced the additional charge of aggravated kidnapping and were sentenced to 8 and 7 years respectively. Number 9. Auckland Thief. A New Zealand woman was recorded attempting to steal courier packages from her Auckland neighbors in October of 2021. When the couple confronted the woman, whom they derisively dubbed Karen, she claimed that she'd merely intended to hand the items directly to the owners. The victims rejected this version of events, agitating the unnamed woman, who continued to deny accusations of theft. When the neighbors asked why a few of the items were hidden in her purse, she lost her composure and began throwing the packages at them. The neighbors continually told the thief to put the stolen items back on the ground where she found them. She refused to apologize or acknowledge her misdeeds, instead continuing her belligerent behavior. The woman insulted the victims and made obscene gestures at the camera. The video was uploaded to TikTok, whereupon users flooded the post with comments encouraging the couple to press charges. Number 8. Jeremy Lee Pauley. Pennsylvania man Jeremy Lee Pauley was arrested on July the 22nd of 2022 for attempting to sell human remains on Facebook. Police had begun investigating the 40-year-old man after receiving a tip about the trafficking of donated body parts. When officers initially searched Pauley's Enola residence, they discovered a number of skeletons, which the man adequately proved had been acquired legally. During a second inspection, however, investigators confiscated several buckets filled with human organs, including brains, a heart, livers, lungs, and a trachea. Most disturbingly, the police reportedly recovered a child's mandible with teeth still attached. The authorities determined that Pauley had purchased the remains from a woman who'd stolen them from the University of Arkansas. The body part collector posted regularly on a Facebook page that catered to vendors of the odd and unusual. According to its description, Pauley was released on a $50,000 bond, pending the continuation of his case's legal proceedings. Number 7. Kostadin Kostov. On August the 4th of 2016, 42-year-old Kostadin Kostov was captured by CCTV transporting the body of his ex-girlfriend, Gergana Prodanova, after murdering her in their shared Exeter, England home. Her naked body would be discovered 12 days later discarded on an embankment. The 38-year-old victim had reportedly begun dating a new man, Tihomir Todorov, and asked Kostov to move out of her apartment. The man ultimately resorted to killing Prodanova, his girlfriend of 15 years, rather than allow her to begin a new relationship. The police became involved after Prodanova's colleagues reported her missing. During questioning, Kostov claimed that she'd traveled to Bulgaria following the death of her mother. He began sending texts to Todorov and several family members, posing as his former partner in an attempt to make it appear as though she was still alive. Investigators conducted a forensic phone analysis and reviewed CCTV footage, which led to the collection of enough evidence to arrest Kostov in connection to Prodanova's death. During the ensuing criminal trial, it was revealed that the man had Googled how long it would take for a human corpse to decompose. Nevertheless, Kostov denied any involvement. The jury deliberated for an hour before finding him guilty. Presiding Judge John Royce sentenced Kostov to 19 years in prison. Number 6. Venezuelan Thief. Footage of an unidentified woman attempting to steal 8 pairs of jeans from a Venezuelan store went viral in November of 2019. The would-be thief had begun wearing each pair one on top of the other in an attempt to make off with the merchandise undetected. However, her clumsy getaway garb was instantly noticed by the store security staff. The video showed the woman pulling the jeans down off her legs while a security guard counted each item. At the end of the viral clip, the 8 pairs could be seen pulled around the suspect's ankles. No further information has been revealed in connection to the incident, as per the latest available updates. Number 5. Charles Nippard. In July of 2022, 86-year-old Charles Nippard and his 52-year-old daughter, Derianne Beck, witnessed a woman stealing from their garden in Dorset, England. For years, Nippard had grown a variety of fruits and vegetables, including potatoes, tomatoes, cucumbers, strawberries and onions. However, during the 2022 growing season, he became suspicious after noticing his crops were smaller than usual. One of his neighbors reported seeing a middle-aged woman ripping Nippard's tomato plants from the vine with both hands and decided to take pictures to catch the culprit in the act. Beck, who assisted her disabled father with his gardening endeavors, subsequently posted the pictures online, soliciting the aid of her social media followers. In an attempt to identify the suspect, Nippard and his daughter believed that the same woman had also stolen over 40 red onions that left drying on a rack in the garden. Beck received several private messages identifying the thief, whose name she didn't reveal publicly. She stated that she hoped the picture alone would be enough to shame the middle-aged woman into stopping her larcenous behavior. Number 4. Daphne Ann Whited. In December of 2013, Daphne Ann Whited, a resident of Cantonment, Florida, was caught stealing Christmas decorations from her neighbors. The 45-year-old was reportedly driving around the neighborhood, removing yard decorations and placing them inside the trunk of her car. One of the neighbors, identified as Sean Young, posted pictures of Whited on his Facebook page after confronting the thief. Young sarcastically asked Whited if she needed help carrying the items, at which point she drove away. Local police were contacted and managed to identify the thief with the help of Young's pictures. Whited was arrested and during subsequent questioning insisted that she hadn't stolen any decorations. She explained that she found an ad on Craigslist stating that the decorations placed on the lawns she visited were free for anyone to take. Predictably, Whited's claims were flatly rejected by investigators, and she was ultimately convicted of multiple counts of petty larceny, leading to a 2-month jail sentence. She was also ordered to pay restitution to the victims. Roughly a year later, Whited was convicted for a second time in connection to an unrelated case of robbery. Number 3. Jeffrey Dahmer. Infamous Wisconsin serial killer Jeffrey Dahmer came perilously close to being caught red-handed by the police on several occasions before he was finally apprehended at his Milwaukee apartment on July the 22nd of 1991. Dahmer murdered 17 men between 1978 and 1991. 12 at his North 25th Street home, 3 at his grandmother's residence, 1 at the Ambassador Hotel, and another while he was living with his parents in Ohio. The notorious killer fatally strangled most of his victims and injected several of their frontal lobes with either hydrochloric acid or boiling water. On the night of his eventual arrest, Dahmer had offered 3 men $100 to pose for naked pictures. 32-year-old Tracy Edwards agreed to the proposition but became suspicious of Dahmer after detecting a strange smell. Edwards would later recount how The Exorcist 3 was playing on a television in the background and that he saw a 57-gallon drum from which the foul odor seemed to emanate. Dahmer began acting erratically, brandishing a knife and placing his head on his intended victim's chest, listening to his heartbeat and detailing his plans to eat his heart. Edwards managed to escape after punching Dahmer in the face during a moment of distraction. The victim ran down the street, eventually stumbling upon 2 police officers, Robert Rolfe and Rolf Mueller. Dahmer allowed the officers to enter his apartment but became hostile and violent when they began searching his bedroom, where they discovered Polaroid pictures of dismembered corpses. After restraining the suspect, Mueller opened the fridge to find a severed human head. Forensic investigators recovered 7 skulls, a bag filled with human organs, and a dismembered torso from Dahmer's residence, as well as 2 skeletons, severed hands and genitals, and several body parts dissolving in acid. On February the 17th of 1992, Dahmer was sentenced to life in prison plus 80 years. On November the 28th of 1994, he was murdered by fellow inmates Jesse Anderson and Christopher Scarver. Number 2. Kevin Smith. Footage recorded by Florida police body cameras showed 37-year-old Kevin Smith being detained after stealing a Chevrolet Silverado that contained 2 children. On October the 10th of 2022, the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office posted the video online showing the alarming incident in full. Smith was tracked down after the truck's owner reported the vehicle as stolen and made a desperate plea to the police to recover it, telling officers his young sons were in the back seat. When a traffic stop was subsequently conducted, Smith initially refused to hand over the keys to the pickup, but eventually complied. The video showed the children telling the officers that Smith wasn't their father. Fortunately, the kids were safely returned to their parents and Smith was arrested without further incident. He was held in custody without bond on charges of grand theft, auto, and felony kidnapping. Number 1. Jesse Shane Kemson. On December the 2nd of 2018, CCTV captured New Zealand man Jesse Shane Kemson pulling a suitcase containing Grace Emmy Rose Mullane's remains out of an Auckland hotel and into a rented car. Kemson, aged 26 at the time, had reportedly murdered 22-year-old Mullane during what he claimed was a consensual, intimate encounter. The pair had met through Tinder and had agreed to go out on the night in question. The young woman was reported missing after failing to reply to text messages sent by her parents. Kemson was arrested 6 days after the murder, and initially, the court forbade the media from publishing his name, an order with which many international outlets didn't comply. Mullane's body was found inside the discarded suitcase on December the 9th. Her corpse reportedly displayed signs of strangulation. Kemson was charged with her murder 2 days later. The suspect had a criminal record related to previous instances of violence against women, as well as stalking. Kemson pleaded not guilty but was ultimately convicted after the jury deliberated for only 5 hours. He was consequently sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 10 years. Multiple appeals have been made in an attempt to overturn the conviction, but each motion was ultimately dismissed by the Supreme Court. Thanks for watching. Would you rather have CCTV footage of yourself go viral because you were recorded shoplifting, or because you went on an offensive rant? Let us know in the comments section below.